Rumours are rife that a cabinet reshuffle is imminent. Following the shake-up in the ANC's top ranks in December's national conference, as well as the recent resignation of Deputy President David Mabuza, there are some vacancies that need filling. And with the State of the Nation address coming up next Thursday, could we see that cabinet reshuffle sooner rather than later? Timing aside, Business Unity South Africa is more concerned with who will make the cut. BUSA is calling for President Cyril Ramaphosa to elect an effective cabinet, saying that's vital to restoring confidence in the economy. Let's unpack this further with BUSA CEO Coovadia. Thank you very much, Mr. Coovadia, for your time this evening. Which portfolios are most concerning for you at this stage?
Well, we've raised a number of portfolios. One is, and thank you for having me, one is mineral resources and energy. It's absolutely a critical issue, not only given the load shedding, but that we've got to deal with our energy infrastructure and our energy environment in the long term. Second is transport, given the state of affairs in our logistics in South Africa. Third is trade, industry and competition, where we believe that business needs to be seen as a partner and not as some sort of an antagonist. And then Department of Public Enterprises is a critical one that we also see. Finance and police. So those are the ones we've earmarked in our letter to the President. But obviously those are just top of mind at the moment, and that's why we've earmarked them.
Right, so you want the President to split mineral resources and energy. Just before I ask you that question in full, just so our viewers know, we have that council sitting from eThekwini on the right side of your screen, that vote of no confidence in Mayor Mxolisi Kaunda happening as we speak. We'll take you there live if there is a development. But in the meantime, Mr. Coovadia, why would you like the President to split the Department of Mineral Energy or Mineral Resources from the Energy Department?
Well, we think mineral resources is a critical element of the economy in the country, and I think that we have a lot of work to do in there. Licensing has been very slow. We've hardly conducted any exploration activities for many years. The policy environment is still not certain as I think investors would like to see it. And given the role of the mining sector in the South African economy and its contribution to the GDP, we believe that it needs specific focus and specific attention to ensure that we have an appropriate policy environment, to ensure that we unblock blockages in licensing and in exploration and so on. And then energy, obviously, as I said earlier, an extremely critical area. So we believe that for one ministry to deal with both of those critical issues in the country, and they're critical because of the situation we find ourselves in, because of mismanagement and misgovernance in the past. That's the situation we find ourselves in. So that's why we've recommended that the ministries be split so that these two critical areas for our economy are given the attention and focus they deserve.
Just for our viewers, breaking news at this point in time, Mayor Mxolisi Kaunda has survived that vote of no confidence. We'll bring you an update from eThekwini a little bit later. We continue for the moment with BUSA CEO Coovadia. Let's talk about the transport departments. That's one of the portfolios you've singled out as being problematic, and we all know about the challenges within Transnet and the logistics network, the rail infrastructure not providing South African businesses with the support it needs to move goods. What would you like to see happen in the leadership of this portfolio? We're obviously going to see Fikile Mbalula. He's moved to Luthuli House, so that position is open. Any candidates that you've earmarked?
No, we're not earmarking any candidates. We're not recommending to the President who he should appoint. What we are suggesting to the President is the qualities that are necessary for ministers, and it's not our role to even suggest to the President who he should appoint. So we haven't earmarked any individuals for these positions. I think on the transport side, logistics is obviously critical. I think that We've lost our competitive advantage as far as ports are concerned, even on the African continent. And any new minister needs to be alive to the worsening operations and financial situation at Transnet and need to fix that up. I think Transnet needs to be more receptive to working with the private sector. We've been talking to Transnet on an ongoing basis, and we believe the private sector can play a critical role in working with Transnet to handle some of the operational issues, to take over some of Transnet's role as far as movement of goods and services are concerned. And a minister needs to look at that. Also, I mean, our road infrastructure is a problem. In different times when we've had the unrest in KwaZulu-Natal, and at other times we've had highways being blockaded. Well, that's a law and order issue, but also the Minister of Transport needs to be alive to those things and how we manage and plan our road network so that we minimize those sorts of things. So transport is critical to economic growth, critical to business because of movements of goods and services. And if we are losing our competitive advantage there, it just makes business more expensive, and some of our logistics companies will simply move to other parts of the continent to transport the goods.
What's BUSA's position on SOEs moving out of the Department of Public Enterprises and into their line departments?
We've taken the view that there should be a separation between the role that the DPE plays as shareholder and the role that the operational side that departments play. We think that given the state of our SOEs at the moment and the amazing amount of work that needs to be done to actually build confidence in them, these should be kept separate at this point in time. But having said that, we'd like to see what the government is doing about the Presidential SOE Advisory Committee and the recommendation they made about some sort of sovereign holding company to manage SOEs. And so we need a fundamental rethink about SOEs, and we believe that any minister of provincial and public enterprises needs to be alive to that, needs to work with the private sector very closely and ensure that there's firstly rationalization of SOEs. What we don't need, let's close. What we do need and what is important in the national interest, let's make sure that they govern properly and they actually operate properly.
We know about the impact of crime on businesses. In the last couple of years, we've seen an incredible surge in extortion of businesses in many parts of the country. And obviously, crime has a much wider impact than just that. But let's talk about the Ministry of Police. Do you think a leadership change is in order there?
Well, again, we're not going to tell the president which ministry or which minister he should change. It's not our place to tell him that. What we are recommending to the president, that the police services and under the leadership, strategic leadership of a minister, need to get on top of organized crime, because a lot of this is organized crime. The so-called business forums that actually stop construction and make all sorts of threats are organized people. They started in KwaZulu-Natal, it's now started in Gauteng. What's happening at Eskom is organized crime. And a minister needs to be alive to that and has to have the resources, the skills, and the expertise to deal with that in his team. We've got to rebuild our crime intelligence service. They fell short during the insurrection in KwaZulu-Natal and other parts of the country. We need to rebuild those, and we need to give the public and business the confidence that we're doing that. And then there needs to be greater cooperation between communities, business, and government in identifying where crime is happening, in putting together structures that can actually alert police and so on. But to do that, communities and business need to have faith in the police services and trust. And any minister in the police, heading up the police, needs to actually build that. And this is probably, after energy, one of the most critical areas that we need to deal with, not only because of business confidence and confidence for investors, but ordinary people in our country are feeling the brunt of the lack of law and order, and essentially the breakdown of law and order in South Africa.
You spoke a little bit earlier about the qualities that you would like to see the president lifting out or emphasizing in the cabinet members that he picks. And we know that leadership is only one of those skills. But what do you think leadership, the impact of leadership is on that filter down process? Because one of the things that we are lacking to a huge extent is implementation. We make incredibly good plans. We have solid policies in place, but implementation is lacking in many of our portfolios.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how leaders influence that implementation in your view.
When we talk about leadership in cabinet ministers, we are saying that one, the minister needs to be absolutely clear that he or she will have an evidence-based approach to what decisions that are made. You don't make decisions on the hoof. You look at evidence, you do the work, you do the research, and you may take decisions on the basis of evidence. You surround yourself with good technical people, because if you don't have the technical people, you can't implement. So you surround yourself with good technical people. You be flexible as evidence changes and as the environment changes. You must be flexible, and you must be able to think on your feet and change your point of view if that is necessary in the national interest. Policy is absolutely critical, but we've seen in the last decade or so that policy becomes a liability. Even good policy becomes a liability if we don't implement. So leadership in the current crises we have, any minister must actually demonstrate that policies are being converted into implementation, and doing that quickly, doing that responsibly, and doing that in a way that there's sound governance behind it. And then we expect ministers to have the leadership so that they recognize that they need to govern. Consultation is absolutely critical, but we can't get into consultation paralysis, and ministers cannot expect a consensus on every issue they consult different stakeholders on. You should have a time frame for consultation. You should listen to stakeholders, and then you should take a decision. So a decision taken, business might not be happy with the totality of that decision, but we have certainty and we can work with that. And we expect ministers to do that. We don't expect ministers to spin wheels in trying to get a consensus on every issue with all stakeholders. So it's those sorts of stuff that we expect to see in leaders, and that's the sort of leadership we expect. And then to ensure that the cabinet is aligned behind the president. We can't have mixed messages coming from government, from different ministers. And if that continues, then the president has got to crack the whip and hold ministers accountable.
So we've talked a little bit about the kind of qualities that you'd like to see, about the kind of leadership skills, but let's talk about qualifications. Do you think cabinet ministers need to have certain minimum qualifications? Because we know that the political influence often overrides whether the person is best suited to that specific portfolio.
Look, ideally, if you have a minister that has the qualifications to actually manage the portfolio he or she has been given, that's a plus. But I'm not too convinced that ministers need to have specific qualification and high sort of postgraduate degrees and so on. I think that's a plus, and that would be, I think, an asset in any minister. But what we need is a minister who understands the sort of leadership we're talking about, who understands his or her responsibilities to this nation, and understands that he or she is not in that position for their own benefit, and understands sound governance, understands the importance of, if he or she does not have those technical capability or even the academic qualifications. He or she must be able to surround themselves with good people to actually ensure that while the minister gives strategic direction, while the minister might have political sauce and a political history, because a lot of our leaders have grown up and have developed their leadership in politics. And we've had very, very good leaders that have developed their leadership skills and honed their leadership skills in politics. But so I think those sorts of people, if they are appointed, must recognize where the gaps are, given that they're not technically qualified and they may not have the necessary academic qualifications. Where are the gaps? And they must be receptive to advice from outside, not only in government, from business and elsewhere, and must utilize the best available capacity in the country to fill those gaps, surround yourself with good people, and never lose focus that you are there to deliver a better condition of life to all of the people in South Africa, and that's your job. And
before I let you go, I've got one last question for you. I want to find out from you. You want to see a leaner cabinet. Can you tell us where you think we can trim some fat?
Well, I think that there are some ministries that have 2 deputy ministers. We need to ask ourselves whether we need that. We need to ask ourselves whether every minister needs a deputy minister, and every ministry needs a deputy minister. I just think to have a cabinet that is so bloated, and despite the size of the cabinet has not actually met the expectations of delivery, we do need to, the president needs to take a step back and say, what's a fit-for-purpose cabinet to actually address the myriad of crises we have in this country? How do you hold your cabinet accountable? And those are the questions the president needs to ask and arrive at the appropriate decisions.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. That was Business Unity South Africa CEO Kaz Coovadia.